I wanted to make a video about the court cases, but while starting to make it, I understood that there's background needed to understand really the depth of these court cases and what they actually mean, and the value of what is being, the reality of what is being claimed in these court cases. And so, in order to understand these court cases, really a basic understanding of the Auroville Foundation Act is needed. And to understand the Auroville Foundation Act, an understanding of the fight with the Sri Aurobindo Society in the 70s and 80s is also absolutely needed. Otherwise, it's very hard to understand what is really being claimed in these court cases, as it's mainly about the legalities of Auroville. But also because the first court case was the famous NGT case, the National Green Tribunal case, which made environmental claim about Auroville, that it's important to understand what actually has been happening here, and that to understand the reality of that myth of the barren plateau, which was magically transformed into a lush green forest. So, first of all, when you go around Auroville, when you go out of Auroville and you go around in Tamil Nadu, around in the area, in the region area, you will see the same thing everywhere. There are trees everywhere. You can find trees everywhere. Wherever you go around here, there is kind of wild growth and trees and greenery everywhere. It's not that Auroville is a green enclave in the middle of a completely barren or urban Tamil Nadu. Not at all. So how did that greenery grow if it wasn't the Aurovillians who did it? Who planted all of these trees if not the Aurovillians? So there's just, stuff just grows, right? Trees just grow and bushes grow and stuff grows. Wherever you go, wherever it has the possibility, it will grow. So the problem with the claims that are being made about Auroville being the barren plateau, and like somebody famously wrote in an article, it was a barren rock. That's obviously not true. It's very easy to believe these things. I believed it for years and years and years, because it's so easy to believe these things when you don't really think rationally. And it's such a beautiful story that you're very inclined, all of us are very inclined to just believe this because we want it to be true. But if you look at all of these old pictures, there's always something growing there. It's never a desert, it's never really barren, and what it certainly wasn't is rock. So what happened is that the place around here was apparently historically always a forest, and the Brits, when they colonized India, they cut down the forest around here. So yeah, there was big deforestation that had happened, but that doesn't mean desertification. Deforestation is not necessarily desertification. So when the Aurovillians arrived here, there was still topsoil. This was fertile soil. Things could be grown. What was happening here is that in the villages, the people were destitute and extremely poor. And so the people who had cattle, who had goats and cows, were the richer people already. And they had their very, very prized possessions of cows and goats. And so the cows and the goats would eat up everything that grew, which maintained a very small growth of stuff. So the first thing that was needed to be done here was protecting saplings from overgrowth. And I am sure that that was not easy in the early days. I'm sure there was some task, and I'm sure that when the torrential rains came in the monsoon, of course, there needed to be runoff protection and things like that. But at the same time, once that was done, once the saplings had grown to a certain height and were out of reach of the cows and the goats and were safe, then stuff just goes by itself. Nature grows. Nobody needs to do anything for nature to grow. It doesn't mean, we are not needed there. It just, stuff grows, and once you pass a certain threshold, everything just grows wild. At the moment here, everything just grows. Leave a plot of land empty for a few months and you come back and it's completely overgrown with whatever. So that whole mythology of how special this all was and how special what has happened here is so special. No, it was just protecting saplings, let stuff grow, and then all goes by itself. So the millions and millions of trees that were planted here, I'm sorry, I can't believe that anymore because there's no need for that. Stuff plants and seeds itself. What we have here also is not, we don't have forest. We have wild growth. Most of it, there's loads of it that is just mulu, it's just thorny bushes and things. And in the early days, which was a smart move, Australian acacia was imported apparently and planted here because it grows very easily. It's a very, very easy growing plant. And it has no natural predators here, so it grows very easily. It is very superficial in its roots, so it falls over immediately also when there's the least bit of wind or cyclone. But that started to give a certain cover at first, which was good. But by now, it's just, we are just, I mean, it's wild growth of acacia trees here, which are called by Mother work trees. So these trees are to be found everywhere. They grow like weeds. Nobody needs to do anything for that. And I'm sorry to say, but nobody really needs to take a lot of credit for doing that also. I mean, yeah, it was a smart move to bring it in. But then it's done, you know, that's the one thing you can take credit for. Yeah, we brought these things in that grow so easily, so it grew easily. But then claiming that it was a Herculean effort to grow whatever growth here, I'm sorry, that's just mythology. And I can somehow prove that. I can't really prove it because I couldn't, of course, record these people. But in the NGT case, at a certain point, there was a joint committee that was created. And in that joint committee, there were Indian officials of the Indian Forest Administration, the Indian Forest Service that came here. So there were people who came to look at these famous Auroville forests that were now fought over and that needed to be protected. And because of all of the mythology that these people had heard, they were absolutely inclined and inclined to believe that there was something very special here that was being destroyed. So they came here and they told me afterwards that they couldn't understand what all the fuss here was about because they wanted to find this special mythological Auroville forest, and they came here and they just found ordinary overgrowth. It's just wild growth everywhere. There was just nothing here. So what are we talking about? There's a few special trees, okay, but you can find them everywhere. So there was nothing absolutely special around here. They were extremely disappointed and really couldn't understand what that all fighting was over. Why do you go to court for a little bit of these ordinary trees that were being cut? Of course, people need to know also that certain trees, special species, were planted specifically on the Crown Road, just like the youth centre, about which I'll make another video. And so there were specific trees planted in the way of the crown to be able, so many years later, to do what they did now and say, oh, you're going to kill all of these species, or you're going to cut these trees, these special trees. How can you? Oh, barbarians, how dare you do that? So that's just bad will. That's really the opposite of what Mother asked us to be here. I mean, Mother asked one thing, sincerity and goodwill. And when you start just blocking a city that everybody knew, who came here, knew that the galaxy plan was there. It was there at the inauguration. I've heard also the argument that, well, Mother never asked anybody to agree to the galaxy plan. Well, no, because it was a given. Nobody would, I mean, the idea was here, this is what Auroville is going to be. Are you going to come and live in this? This is the galaxy plan. Are you willing to come and live in the galaxy plan? And that's what Auroville was meant to be. That's what the idea was. She invited people to Auroville to come and live in that city that she was going to build in a few years. So no, she never asked specifically for these things because it was a given. There was no debate. As she said later in a message, people are not invited here to come and to debate what the project is. We're here to do it. We're invited here to do the project, not to figure out what it is. So yes, this is a first clarification about that mythology, about the forests of Auroville that are so precious and so much in danger. So next part will be the Sri Aurobindo Society and how that pans out. So now let's move forward. There is always greenery in Auroville. There always will be greenery in Auroville because we all want it. And Roger designed Auroville as an extremely green city. That's why we all need to live closely together for spiritual reasons, in small spaces, with loads of greenery around us, and a whole green belt as a buffer zone. So we're on our way to making that a reality. Let's go for it. Jai Ma, Jai Hind.